world, it's Keely and I'm back for another video. This is going to be kind of a chatty what I'm currently reading update. Today is the 16th of February and I have finished a handful of books so far this month, but I'm also in the middle of a lot. And my plan for the next week is going to be to try to really focus in on some of these and get them done so I can start the next massive pile of books that I have on my list. We got back from vacation on the 13th, and like I said, today's the 16th, so we've been kind of this past weekend just like doing a lot of chores, resetting the house. My wrinkled shirt is driving me crazy. Reset the house and all of that. I did a ton of chores before we left for vacation so that we'd come home and not really have much to do. But it was like, you know, all the laundry from vacation, putting away our travel stuff, kind of resetting my brain for getting back to work starting tomorrow, and then dealing with like just life in general. We had a lot of fun. We didn't take any electronics really except for our phones and our Kindles. And I took 3 books with me and I finished one of them. I made a huge chunk, a huge dent in another one. And then the third one was a library book that I didn't pick up once while I was there. But I did end up finishing 3 or 4 books on vacation, which was pretty incredible. So I figured we just kind of talk through the ones that I've read recently, and I won't do like a super in-depth review or anything, and then move in the ones that I'm currently reading. Today was just kind of hanging out, and then early this morning I had to go and get some blood work done because that was something super fun that happened right before we went on vacation. I had a doctor appointment and my doctor is now having me do a bunch of tests for PCOS, which is super duper fun. So today I just got the blood work part done. Not a big problem doing that because I'm not afraid of needles or anything. I'm covered in tattoos, so I obviously don't have a problem with needles. I'm just like frantically refreshing the portal, my medical portal page, like what are the results, what are the results? And my sister was like, do you want PCOS? And I was like, I don't know that I want it or not want it. I just want answers. Like I want them to put a label on it and be like, this is the thing that's causing these symptoms. Like I would love if we could figure that out, because my doctor is thinking like if it does show up that I have PCOS, that could play into a lot of other issues that I've had for a very, very long time. I don't know. Part 1 of getting tested was today, and then at the end of March I have to go for another test, which I am not looking forward to at all. I'm gonna get it done on a weekend. Thankfully, that's why I have to wait so long, because how horrible this test sounds to me as someone with a long history of medical anxiety and trauma. I was like, if I have to do this during the week, I'm gonna have to take like that day and probably the next day off of work just to emotionally recover. And then also I'm making my husband go with, I'm not making him come with me. He would come with me regardless, but I told him like, you're gonna come with me too. I was like, okay, let's just do it on a weekend if we can, and then this way we don't have to worry about our work schedules or anything like that. I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm gonna try really hard not to worry about that until I have to, which is the end of March. Which will come a lot faster than I want it to. Also, don't you love, do you ever go, if you have the ability to go on like an online portal and review your doctor's notes and stuff? I reviewed my doctor's notes and it said like, yes for depression and patient presents as anxious. And I was like, how dare you? This is my baseline level of anxiety and depression. Don't tell me that I'm depressed and anxious when right now I feel fine. Like, it's just funny how you present to different people versus how you feel in your own body. I read on vacation. I have a stack of books here in front of me. I'm trying to like precariously keep things in certain places because unfortunately we think our little doggy might have an upset stomach, and so I had to shampoo my carpet in a couple different places today. One of the books I finished on vacation was Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. This is his first published novel, and I had an incredible time reading it. I wrote all over it. Like you can kind of, it's hard to see, but you can kind of see. I didn't put any tabs because I noticed that when I do tab stuff, my books look ridiculous with how many tabs there are. So I just wrote all over it instead. This was the first book that I was reading written by James Baldwin for my James Baldwin slow read long project that I'm doing, where I'm reading his novels in chronological order from when they were published, but then I'm going to throw in some of his essays along with some other books to kind of supplement this whole process. This book is about John, who lives with his brother, his stepbrother Roy, and they have a sister. They live with a mom and stepdad. Stepdad is a preacher and he is incredible incredibly abusive emotionally, religious abuse, physical abuse to the kids, and physical violence against the mom, also sexual violence in here. John is queer and discovering that he is queer, and the kind of religion that his family, especially his stepdad, really is involved in is a very kind of like punitive fire and brimstone kind of religion, where you have to be a certain way, and if you're not that way, you're the problem. Like it's very punitive. I just would describe it as like fire and brimstone. It's very how I was raised, of like the type of Baptist that my family, I have extended family that are this type of Baptist, where I was told as a teenager, like, if you listen to metal music, if you wear all black, like telling a goth teenager that wearing all black means that I'm gonna go to hell. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look stylish as fuck. Like, okay, that doesn't mean anything to me. Because also there was like no conversation about like why I, air quotes, went goth, which was like living in a world of abuse, but whatever. So it's very much like fire and brimstone that John is dealing with. And this is a very like semi-autobiographical book of James Baldwin's life. His real life scenario was that his stepfather was very much fire and brimstone, very, very violent, hated John and hated James. And it was really fascinating kind of reading a little bit about James Baldwin's upbringing and then seeing that play out in this book. So when I move to the biography that I have of him, it's going to be very interesting to see how much of what happens in this book actually happened to him, because I know that some of it did, but I don't know how much of it is true and how much of it is him filling in the blanks of, what his stepdad grew up with. Because we do know some stuff about his stepdad, which is that his stepdad's parents were formerly enslaved, and he really, really, really hated white people, and for good reason. But how that played out with his relationship with James, who had friends that were white and who was supported by teachers that were white, when his parents, particularly his stepdad, was not supportive of him as a writer, as someone that was very artsy, like theater, all of that kind of stuff. And then dealing with, John/James realizing that he's queer and having that kind of forced in his brain of, if you're this way, then you're against the church and you're against these teachings and you're going to hell and you can't be saved and things like that. So fascinating. Broken up into a couple sections. We kind of start with John and his family at the beginning. We're really learning about his relationship with his brother and his family, and then it moves. It kind of goes back and forth between present tense or like present and past, with learning more about the upbringing of his aunt and his stepdad. And I think I mentioned before that I really loved the aunt character in this book. I thought she was one of the most fascinating ones. I mean, everyone in this book is really fascinating, but I thought the aunt was really interesting because she was one of the few that would actually stand up for John and stand up for his mom and stand up for his stepbrother against the dad. However, I think even at one point, the mom tries to get her to stop and is basically saying without saying, you get to go home. You've made him angry, and then you get to leave. I don't get to leave. I have to deal with the aftermath of you making him very, very angry, him being the stepdad. So it was very, very scary at times. But yeah, I had a great time with this one. I am so happy that I decided to do this project. I can't wait to move into the next book. I do not remember what next novel there is, but I will be switching to Notes of a Native Son, one of his essay collections, and also reading along with that one the biography I have of James Baldwin by David Leeming, who was one of his friends and assistant, knew James Baldwin for 25 years, and then a fiction book called Native Son by Richard Wright that came out in the 40s, I think, and was very controversial at the time. I know that there were edited versions. The copy I have, I don't think is edited, but I'm not sure. But I know that Notes of a Native Son is a response kind of to Native Son by Richard Wright. So that's why I got that to read collectively together. Finished this one. I thought this one was great. Then I also read, I will have to insert a picture here, I read The Undercutting of Adam and Rosie, or Rosie and Adam by Megan Bannon, which is the third and final book in the Undertaking of Heart and Mercy kind of universe. So this was a trilogy. The first book, Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, I read when we stayed at the same hotel on Universal years ago, and so I was like, it'd be amazing to finish the trilogy while staying in the same hotel, and I did, and it was lovely. I had such a great time. That one, their romance, they're like fantasy with romance, but the fantasy world is that it's like they live on kind of this border town where there are these doors that go into kind of like this other world area that is cordoned off, and there are like rangers that live in that or that work in that area. There's like the townspeople, each grouping of characters. There's Heart and Mercy, Twyla and Frank, and then Rosie and Adam. They're each individual characters you're introduced to in the first book, and then their lives. And I thought it was great. I had such a fun time with it. It was so kind of obvious what one of the big twists was in this one, because they kept hinting at what it would be, and it's one of those things where the main character like kept thinking to themselves like, huh, that's weird. Anyway, I'll think about it later. And I'm like, well, of course you're gonna realize what it is later on. I'm so happy that I finished that one. I got that from the library. I thought that was excellent. So I can mark that off as a series that I completed in 2016, and I started it in like 2023 or 24, so yay. The other one that I started and finished while we were on vacation was one of the ones that was on my list of 20 books or 26 books for 2026. I read the entirety of The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty on vacation, because the second book comes out in a couple months, and I was like, well, I need to read this for multiple reasons. One, because it's been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years. Two, because my husband got me it for Christmas a couple years ago, and every book that he gets me for Christmas, I try to finish before the next Christmas, and I never finish the full list, so this was a backlog one that I wanted to get to. Also because I just really wanted like a fun fantasy story. I've been reading a lot of like really hard-hitting nonfiction and even fiction, and I was like, okay, so that I don't burn out, I need to also have some fun stuff in there. That's why I threw this one in. This one was so fun. It's huge, but I read it very quickly. It's over 400 pages. This one is about Amina Al-Sarafi, who at the beginning of the book is a retired pirate. And she is like physically huge. Like she's very, very tall, and she is incredibly like powerful. She's very talented as a pirate and a fighter. But she is living in this small mountain house that's kind of hidden from everyone with her daughter and her family. And one day this old woman shows up to the house, which is like really weird because no one comes to the house. So she immediately is on guard. She tells her daughter to go hide. This older woman who's very rich, kind of high up, shows up and is like, I want to hire you because my granddaughter was kidnapped and I want you to go rescue her. And by the way, if you don't, I have all this blackmail on you. I'm going to ruin your life and your family's lives. And she's like, cool. We then follow Amina as she is getting her old group back together, getting back on her ship, and just learning more about her and her history and all of the characters that she's friends with. I loved this book. I thought it was so much fun. I read the ebook copy and I was like highlighting stuff on the ebook copy, so I need to get that. I need to pull that up on my Kindle so I can go in and highlight some stuff, because there were some lines at the beginning, particularly about like men and women and patriarchy and stuff, that I thought were just so great. So I was like highlighting stuff. So I need to keep this one out so that I can reflect that in the physical book. Then the other thing that I was reading while we were on vacation, I made a decent dent in this big one, The Love Songs of WEB DuBois. Thank you so much to the commenter. I am so sorry, I'm completely blanking on your username right now, but the commenter that let me know how he preferred his name pronounced. He pushed against the French pronunciation of his name. I don't yet know why. I did find a biography, I think is on like a Kindle daily deal, but like it's an ebook daily deal also with bookshop.org, so I'm gonna get it through them, not Kindle, to read a biography of W.E.B. Du Bois so I can learn more about his life. I read a little bit of his Wikipedia page. He was a sociologist, he was a professor, he helped found the NAACP, very outspoken civil rights activist. I've been trying to learn a little bit more about him since he is obviously a big part of the reason for this book and also the writing in this book. And so I need to pick back up The Souls of Black Folk by Du Bois. I started this one when I got it before we went on vacation, but I didn't take this one on vacation, so I need to get back into it. This one is a massive intergenerational family saga, and it's covering so much stuff. So much stuff. There are so many characters, so many people. I am, again, writing all over this one, having a great time reading it. Now, this book is almost 800 pages, so will I finish this book in the next week? No. This one might go into March for March of the Mammoths as well. I'm gonna count it because it's huge and it's taken me a while to read, but that's okay because I'm having a really, really good time with it. So I'm up to page 275. Really, really loving it. Will continue to read this one. Now, I also have been working my way through Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. Again, trying to read something really fun in the middle of a lot of real hard-hitting books. This one is, I think, a YA, maybe? But this one, if you don't know anything about it, it is a queer retelling of the descendants of King Arthur and Guinevere and all of that. So you're following Gwendolyn and her brother Gabriel, and then who are royalty, and then you're following Arthur and his kind of assistant guy, Sidney. And Arthur and Gwendolyn were basically like promised to each other to help like solidify the political standing of Gwendolyn's dad. But the fun thing is Gwen is gay and so is Arthur. And they both realize that about each other very, very early on in the book. And so they make this agreement that like we can pretend to be involved and then we can actually get married, but it's really just to protect our own selves so that we can then be with the people that we want to be with. And it's super duper fun so far. I'm having a really good time with it. We went to the park yesterday to read and I read, I think I'm like page 124 or something. We're learning more about Arthur and his shit dad. That part was like, oh man, like that sucks to read about what's happening to Arthur. Gwen and Arthur had a very good conversation, that last little portion that I was reading. So I'm happy about that. So I will continue to read that one. Today I finished a book. I sat down and finished Perfect Victims and the Politics of Appeal by Mohammed El-Kurd, who is a Palestinian journalist from Jerusalem. And he wrote this book. It says, Perfect Victims is an urgent affirmation of the Palestinian condition of resistance and refusal, an ode to the steadfastness of a nation. And this is a collection of sections, like very small sections. Some are only like a page and a half, where he's talking about what makes a perfect victim and how Palestinians are not allowed to be victims and how that is kind of reinforced through colonialism. Western reporters are kind of reinforcing that, and he talks a lot about the New York Times and some other big organizations and how the way that they phrase the articles that they're writing about Palestine and Palestinians is very telling on who they're getting their funding from. I was just writing all over this one, and I actually started highlighting sections that I wanted to share. Now, if you don't want to hear me read from a book, you don't have to. But I think this is a book that every white person should read. Every white American should read, because what the fuck? I will say this one took me about a month to get through because it's very heavy, and especially I started reading the section yesterday where he's specifically covering children, and I work in social services. I have for over a decade, but I've always worked with older people. Like that, my main focus, I was a subject matter expert for many, many years on people over the age of 60. I specifically, because I can't do stuff with kids. I just can't. Like, it's just being still working on my own trauma from childhood abuse. I just have such a hard time doing anything with children. I spent a year in grad school working in the child services system in Philadelphia and quickly realized, hey, I can't do this long term. That section was really hard to get through of all the sections, which is, you know, telling that this book that's about, you know, horrific violence against a massive population of people, and the section that was about kids was the hardest to get through. All of it is hard to get through. I'm not like completely dead inside. It is very hard to get through, but having been exposed to victimization for a long time for my job, it doesn't hit me as hard as it would probably hit someone that is not exposed to it all the time. So my favorite section of this book, he's talking at the end about humor and how he's using humor as a way to help break the colonial power of oppressor versus oppressed, and how if you let me just read this section. In one section he says, if we move beyond the reductive idea that the humor of the oppressed is merely a defense mechanism, we can reveal its strategic advantage and transformative potential. And then he goes on to write this section that says, So we write our books and make our films knowing that anything we say, being Palestinians, seriously or in jest, even anything we imply can and will be used against us in the courts of law and public opinion. We talk to each other as if the sniper is standing over our shoulder, and I understand the impulse to self-censor. I know that as Palestinians, our notoriety precedes us. We are guilty until proven otherwise, and otherwise is often impossible. I know that I probably do not resemble myself in most people's imaginations, but there are vast universes outside of the sniper's gaze, worlds beyond the colonizer's field of vision. What matters more than how we will be viewed by our enemies or our allies is how we view one another and what we inspire in one another. Is it self-respect or self-reproach? To be irreverent at the podium is to remind yourself that you're part of a collective, a scrutinized people whose psychic and affective allowances are shrinking endlessly. The working classes, the exhausted, the under-resourced, those who do not have access to Ivy Leagues or a knack for doublespeak. And in that performance of irreverence, you enmesh yourself in their complexities. You make room for them in the public discourse, no matter how they articulate themselves, and you reassign the blame from the victim to the perpetrator. Otherwise, we would be punching down. We would save ourselves and ascend in our careers by throwing others under the bus. For one to be described as genteel, someone else needs to be viewed as savage. Who among our enemies is given the microphone? Government officials whose remarks by virtue of their position are often featured in the introductory paragraphs of news articles. And who among us is allowed to speak? Most of the time it's the bereaved, the dispossessed, and the vulnerable, those who are thrust into the domain of advocacy in spite of themselves and individually transformed into one-person media ministries without perfect scripts or institutional backing. I'm not flippant because of contrarian tendencies or for the entertainment value. I'm flippant because I realize that the majority of the Palestinian people do not possess the capacity or desire to coddle ethnocentric values and racist attitudes. Where in the war zone would I find the space to alter our vocabulary, and why would I want to? Why would I want to search in our dreams for an indicting lucidity, or comb through our colloquialisms looking to filter out the uncouth? Again, why should I bypass the fires engulfing our cities to extinguish hypothetical flames? That section was in response to something that he apparently said. I don't think he ever actually says what he said, but something that he said previously that in the media got like completely misconstrued. And so he's really talking about how like Palestinians can't say anything because you're already set up for failure. And then he has a section where he gives a perfect example of like this jokey mentality. He says, a Palestinian man walks home in the war zone. There are sirens and explosions in the distance and a military tank outside of his home. He approaches the Israeli soldier in the armored vehicle and scolds him. How many times did I tell you not to park your tank in my driveway? Here the man has created for himself a realm in which the mighty is but a boring nuisance, a bureaucratic measure like doing your taxes. In this realm, the soldier's domination does not permeate into the psyche. His rifle is but a toy gun, and the tear gas in the air is just someone's nauseating perfume. In other words, irreverence is a dignified act of refusal. For those confined by siege or incarceration can be emancipated in the mind. To dig a tunnel, one must first imagine it before clawing at the floor. Irreverence builds an alternative reality where the occupation is not impenetrable and the occupier is not indelible. The police officer is not all-knowing, nor is the sniper omnipresent. Here, the symbolic meaning of military barriers does not extend beyond the tangibility of their cement. For the speaker, the young activist, the academic, or the taxi driver, irreverence is not just a rhetorical strategy, but a form of self-preservation and defiance, a stubborn rejection of psychological subjugation. Irreverence is the discursive equivalent of standing tall. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be flippant, to satirize and ridicule my seemingly invincible colonizers, to belittle them, to banish them outside of my inner monologues, to turn them into a punchline. I just thought that was so great. Talking about how, it's so easy, like he said, it's so easy to look at someone's humor in the face of great tragedy and think like, oh, it's just a defense mechanism. And to an extent, for some people, sure it is. I use humor as a coping mechanism, as a defense mechanism all the time. But he's saying how it can also be an act of resistance because you're immediately taking the occupier down a peg. And I just thought that was so great. I thought this was excellent. This really makes me want to pick back up that book that I started a couple years ago. I think I actually started it last year on the history of Palestine and learn more about it. So I just finished that one. Lots of books that I am currently reading. I need to get back to The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I got up to Spring. I need to pick that one back up. I started also on vacation on the plane on the way home. I started Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, and I was reading it on my Kindle and highlighting a bunch of stuff. So I need to pick up my Kindle and go through and highlight stuff on the actual book. I also this week would love to finish, if I can, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, so I can move into other books that I would like to read. There is one thing about at least the beginning part of this book. I'm up to chapter 3, and so far I'm just having such a hard time accepting what he's saying at face value for one specific thing. And that specific thing is that it is the role and responsibility of the oppressed to rehumanize their oppressor. He basically said, like, very, very shortening this, but he basically says that by being an oppressor, you dehumanize others around you. You view them as objects, you view them as commodities, you view them as tools. And by doing that, you are also dehumanizing yourself. And you can't just wake up one day and be like, this is bad, I shouldn't do this. You need to be taught it, I guess, is what he's saying, by the actions of the oppressed. Like, the oppressed need to show you that they're humans. And I've been having such a hard time with this. Like, why does it have to be the role of the oppressed to fix the oppressor? Like, fuck you. I don't know. I'm hitting that roadblock in my head as I'm reading it with, like, really, dude? Like, really? I get what he's saying about, like, you know, the oppressor loses their ability to be a human because they devalue humans. And so they're losing that kind of, like, emotional capacity, that empathy, that, you know, reasonable anything. I get that. I don't know if he's actually saying, like, that should be the goal of oppressed people, or if he's just saying, like, they're not going to do it on their own. It's only going to be through others showing them. I don't know. But it was so interesting because we were watching Emperor's New Groove last night. It's one of our favorite Disney movies, and we watch it at least once a year. We have, like, a catalog of movies that we watch at least once a year. Emperor's New Groove is obviously on there. But I was just thinking, we literally I paused the movie, and I was like, I need to tell you something. And I was like, I'm about to be so social worker Keely right now. And he was like, what? And I said, this is 100% an example of the oppressor changing his mind because of the behavior of the oppressed. And that is from Pacha saving Cusco and treating him nicely, that Cusco was like, actually, I'm not gonna decimate your village and, you know, destroy everyone that lives, like, all of their houses and force you to move elsewhere and make you refugees. Like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna be nice and we're friends now. And I just thought that was like, oh my God, that's such a perfect example. So my husband was like, first of all, yes, but second of all, can we just watch this funny movie? And I was like, yes, of course, but I just want it known that I'm seeing this play out in that movie. So I thought that was interesting. I have a lot of books on my radar. So I bought a couple books and I'm very excited to work on new projects. I spent a lot of time last night while we were watching some Disney movies adding stuff to my reading journal. So let me kind of flip through real quick. So one of the things that I'm going to be working on is making my way through Stowe Prize winners. So the Stowe Prize, it's one that I just learned about this year, and I would imagine this is the case because I've never seen anyone else talk about it, but maybe that's just who I'm watching. But the Stowe Prize is a prize. It says the winning book applies informed inquiry, is accessible and engaging to a wide audience, and promotes empathy and understanding. In creating this award, the Stowe Center recognizes the power of literary activism. So it was created to recognize books, fiction and nonfiction, that are saying something huge. And it's based off of Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. And that book was published in 1852. I was reading on Wikipedia, it's considered a landmark in protest literature. It was written by a white woman abolitionist at the time, and it highlighted the kind of horrific shit that was happening with slavery that a lot of people refused to know about, acted like they didn't know about, never engaged their brains to think about. Maybe some of it was like they couldn't believe it was actually that bad. And so there was a lot of conversation back and forth at the time about this book, and people wanted it removed, they wanted it banned, all of that. And I don't know if we ever actually had to read it for high school. I honestly can't remember, and that's not because of, like, maybe we didn't read it or whatever. That's my own, like, PTSD, having complete sections of my childhood that are blacked out. Like, I just don't have memories. But I somehow got it into my head that this was a book that was kind of crap. And I don't know where that came from. I can't remember one specific person saying that book is, you know, shit or whatever. I'm imagining that it's just the general discourse of being raised in white supremacist bullshit as a white person in the United States, because it was an abolitionist book and to get rid of slavery. I'm not sure, but I never read it. So that's also why I went to Barnes & Noble, because I wanted to get a copy of the Signature Classics edition that has slightly bigger font and is slightly cheaper. And I wanted to have it so I can write all over it and read it. So I decided that I would make a spread specifically for the Stowe Prize winners. Some of them I have already read, and I left sections. I left like an area to write down quotes. The first prize came out in 2011, and I haven't read that one. I read the 2013 winner, which is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. I have read Begin Again by Dr. Eddie S. Jr., which won in 2021. Literally just read that last month because of my James Baldwin project, because that's part James Baldwin biography, part commentary, civil justice book. I read James. That was another book I read on vacation. I read James by Percival Everett. That won in 2025. That was an incredible book. And then the shortlist has come out for 2026. I've read one of them so far, which is We Refuse by Kelly Carter Jackson. I read that one from the library. And then I have another one that was also nominated, and that's this one, which is Queen Mother, Black Nationalism, Reparations, and the Untold Story of Audley Moore by Ashley D. Farmer. So I don't know if I'll do vlogs. I've been wanting to do a lot of vlogs, but I just don't have the energy to do it. It's much easier right now for me to just kind of sit down and talk about books, edit it, and then throw it up there instead of like coming back to filming. So I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's another project that I'll be working through over the next couple of years, is like following the Stowe Prize and working on that. So here's what my February spread. Those are the books that I finished so far for February. I have a handful of books that I said I was going to read. So I am currently reading this one, which was part of TBR Spin. But then I have lots of other ones that I need to get to. And I started doing this other section too that I thought would be really fun, that I wanted to show you guys, because I love this idea. So I started doing this spread, and this is books that talk to each other. I first like heard that phrase from Jen Campbell, where she did a video where she was talking about books that talk to each other, and it's books that come into your life that sometimes they do actually write in response to each other, and sometimes they don't, and it's just like coincidence that two authors wrote about something very similar at similar times. I decided that since I'm reading a lot of like books together, that I would put all this down. So the first two that I read together were Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin with Begin Again by Dr. Eddie S. Jr., because that one is part biography of James Baldwin in his early life, and then Go Tell It on the Mountain is his first novel, a lot about his early life. The next one that I have is Read Until You Understand by Farah Jasmine Griffin. This is the profound wisdom of Black life and literature. And along with that one, I am reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, because the first chapter in Read Until You Understand is about the bluest eye. So I have that. Then I have the love songs of WEB DuBois with The Souls of Black Folk. So reading those together. I have a section for the Harlem Renaissance, because I'll be reading a bunch of books about Harlem soon. And then I have Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin with Native Son by Richard Wright. It's just something I'm gonna keep doing. I thought that was really cool, reading these books that like talk to each other or are in response to each other. I thought that would be great. And I also need to throw in this one, Black in Blues by Imani Perry, along with Invisible Man, because that is something, the color blue is coming up a lot. And, you know, in The Bluest Eye, and also in the smoke, the cigarette smoke that he keeps referencing of the white men in this book, he keeps calling it blue. And so I was like, oh, well, I have this book about blue as a color in Black lives, and I'm just so fascinated now. I just want to start everything. Kind of how my brain is working. I was telling my husband when we were on vacation, I was like, I have been having the time of my life studying again. I love studying. And I know that some of you out there are the same that I am, where I love the idea of being in school. I love actually being in school, but what I really, really love is studying and learning. And so that's something that I was like, you know, I was finally able to kind of put that into words for myself and be like, oh, okay, that's what I enjoy, is I just enjoy studying. It doesn't necessarily matter what it is, because I have so many interests, but as long as I'm doing it in the moment, I'm just enjoying it. I thought that I would just do a rambly video, talk to you guys about what I'm reading, which is everything. Still, the best way to follow what I'm reading at any given time is my story graph, which is always linked below, although sometimes I do forget to update it for like a week and a half, and then I'll have to go back and add all the books that I finished in the meantime. That's kind of the best way to see what I am reading. But okay, I think that's enough rambling for now. I just wanted to update you guys. Let me know if there are any new releases that you're excited about. I have been going through new releases, and I made a wish list of 2026 new releases to keep track of. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books. You would recommend them? Do you want to buddy read anything? If you ever want to join me for a project, I think that'd be super fun. I think that's it. I hope you guys are doing okay. I will have videos coming up. I'm gonna do March of the Mammoths. I'm planning on doing Irish readathon this year. I have to look and see what the prompts are. I have at least 2 books so far for the Irish readathon. All right, I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for checking in. Bye.